Hello all, this is Mrs. Nichols and we are practicing our watercolor skills today with a little piece that we're going to do together. So first things, make sure that you've got your table set, you've got your palette, you've got your water cup, you've got your brush. That's a number 8 little Cornell, or pretty much any number 8 round brush will do. We've got our pipette so we can wet down our palette if we need to. You've got paper towels. All right. Now this is just this is a project that will just help you practice those techniques that we learned in the last video. One quick thing about setting your table, you'll notice that my palette is on the left side. That's because I am left-handed. If you are right-handed, you will put the palette on the other side next to your dominant hand. Also, your water will be over there. Then you can keep everything so that you don't drip water all over the place. Okay, so we're going to be making a little beach scene, and let's start with this. So we're going to make a horizontal line across. Now you'll notice that I've got my paper all stretched. I've put tape all the way around, masking tape all the way around it. We're just using a half sheet of the Richardson paper. That's our good practice paper. Okay. So you're going to take a horizontal line. Now, this is, you can change these a little bit. I think I want to put, I think I want to have lots of ocean this time. So I'm going to put my horizontal line about a third of the way up the paper. Okay, and it's a nice horizontal line. You don't need to use a ruler, just go for it. Okay, put in a nice horizontal line. Throw in an extra island out there. I'm going to draw a little darker. When you're using your pencil and drawing for a watercolor, make sure that you're using a fairly light pencil and a fairly light hand, so you don't end up with a lot of pencil lines when you're finished. Let's throw in your island. This is your island. You're just putting it down the corner. Notice it's just kind of a jaggedy line in that bottom right hand corner. Okay. Okay, we're going to put a couple of palm trees. They don't look like palm trees yet, but they will. They look like eyelashes right now. So there's one eyelash, 2 eyelashes, 3 eyelashes. Let's do that again. Now, if you need to pause the video for a second to get the drawing in, do it. Okay, now you've paused the video. Now let's start to paint. This is a very simple little painting, but it's helping us practice all those skills we learned on that practice sheet we did earlier. Okay, let's mix up a nice sky color. Now, sky color, anything you want. I happen to be using kind of a bluey purple today. You can use sunset-y colors. You can use whatever you want, okay? Make sure you've got quite a good little puddle of it mixed up, because it's really hard to go back in and say, oh, I don't have enough color. Besides that, it's good practice to mix them up. Okay, you'll notice it's not too pale. If it's really, really light, it starts looking like, let me make it mix up a little puddle over here. It starts looking like that. Hi, I'm not really a color. You're not going to be happy with that later. Also, think about, where this painting would be. If it's Tahiti or Hawaii or somewhere like that, the water's kind of a different color. It's kind of got this, beautiful greenish tone to it, and there's a little bit of phthalo in it. It's a little bit brighter than anything we'd see here. All right, so we're going to put in a wash. Run it across. Now this might take twice. Bring it across. Now you'll notice I've got a little dot of paint right there. I'm not going to panic about it. Okay, now we want to bring this down and create a graded wash with it. But I want to start out at the top with a nice intense color. No wimpy skies. So this color at the top is going to be pretty good and intense. Then as I work down, see this wet edge here? Just softening up that wet edge. just water, plain old water. Now you'll notice, I'm gonna go right over the top of those little hills, that little extra island, and I'm gonna stop right at my horizon line. Okay. Now, this, notice how you've got nice little gradation there going on? Okay, looks like maybe it's early in the morning or something. If you want to soften that up a little bit, you can. You can even throw in just a little bit of another color in there if you want to. Sometimes it's fun to ride along this horizon, just throw a little bit of yellow in while it's still wet. Just a little tiny bit of warmth right by the horizon there. Okay. Now, this you need to let it dry for a few minutes, because just let it dry for a couple of minutes. Now, if you're careful, we can keep going, because a lot of times you will notice, especially when you look out on our Great Salt Lake, that there's a little white edge right along the horizon, and that's just reflections. Okay, so there's a little reflection we see. So if you leave a little tiny white edge right along here of dry paper, then we can keep going with your ocean. Okay. So I'm going to pull in some more color here. Just pull in a little tiny strip. It might start blending over here, but I'm okay with that. Okay. Now, does it have to be all the same exact color? I don't think so. You can decide, well, maybe I want to add throw a little more green in it. And as I go down, I'm changing the color a bit, because oceans actually do that. Be a little bit careful that you're keeping this edge wet, so that you're not ending up with stripes, because I don't think oceans do that stripe thing. Now, if you get a little bit of dry brush going on, it'll look like waves. So a little dry brush where you've got some of that paper kind of showing through. Don't worry about if you're going over the top of your island a little bit. It's okay. We're going to use some really nice opaque. See that little stuff in there where you've got a little dry brush going on? I am so totally leaving that. Okay. Now, I don't love what happened right there for a minute, so I'm just going to see if I can. You'll notice I'm working all horizontal strip, kind of in a horizontal way. That's because the light hits water in a horizontal way. Water is obviously self-leveling, and we're trying to get it to look like it's actually water. So make sure all of your strokes are very, very horizontal. You'll notice I got a little bleeding right here. I'm kind of okay with that, because it's starting to look like little reflections and stuff of clouds or something up here. And I'm getting a little bit of blooming up and through here, and I'm okay with that. Anything I do to fix it's going to make it worse, and I can show you how to lift later. So it's actually a good opportunity. One of the things about watercolor is knowing when to leave it alone. If we go in and try to fix it, we lose some of that spontaneity with it. Okay, now we get to just sit it here and let it dry for a minute. If you need to use a hairdryer, do that. Okay, I'm going to come in, and this is the island, but it's not right down there near the water, so I'm going to come in and throw some dry brush.
Sorry, I saw your sign right as I opened the door.
Okay, now this thing is dry, and I've waited about 20 minutes, so you may have to do that. Okay, so we've got a sky, we've got some water that looks like it's got some little reflections in it. Now we need to put in our island. And what we're going to do, well, let's see, let's put in some palm trees first. Now, there's a light source here, so what I need you to do is say, well, where's my sun coming from? So I'm guessing my sun would come from this direction. Okay, and let's do some palm trees for just a minute. Now I'm going to mix up some yellow, kind of thick paint. And we're gonna put in the sunny stuff on our palm trees and on the trunks of the palm trees. So I'm gonna take some of my medium yellow, cad yellow medium. That's not the lemon yellow, it's the other one. Take a little bit of yellow ochre that's in your palette. Yellow ochre is just a little bit opaque, and so it covers up other things. And notice your painting is totally dry. Okay, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna come in here and you're gonna say, all right, I'm gonna make the trunks of my palm trees here. And you're going, Mrs. Nichols, those are not supposed to be yellow. Well, what this is doing is this is giving us a little bit of color underneath so that we can have a light side and a dark side to these things later. You'll notice they're curved, they're a little bumpy, that's fine. I don't like them to get too thick because then they don't look like they're flexible. Notice they're not totally straight. Also, they do get bigger at the bottom, so give them a little bit of a base here, and they kind of grow like in a bunch. Okay, same color, still got that yellow ochre. Now, with palm fronds, they're going to come out from a center, like out through here, and they're going to come out like the spokes of a wheel, except they're going to kind of droop because gravity kicks in. So we're going to come out, pull down. See, the wind's going to be blowing. Pull that down. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's put one more in. They will also overlap. They're going to overlap each other. They're going to overlap the tree next to it. They're going to overlap the ocean. They might even go off the top of the page. One thing I'm going to caution you, don't make these little sad, then they look like dandelions. We're not going for dandelions. Okay, so this is the main structure of your tree. So now we're going to come back in, and it's still wet, and that's okay. I'm going to put the little palm fronds in. And I'm still using that slightly opaque yellow ochre, maybe with a little bit of the cad yellow medium mixed in. Okay. And we're going to come in, and this is kind of like painting eyelashes onto your palm fronds. Now, because they're drapey, we're looking at it and saying, well, which direction would they drape? So that one's going to kind of drape down. This one's probably going to come off both sides a little bit more. So this one's going to kind of do that. Either way, they droop toward the ground because we do have gravity. So we're kind of making this up. So pretty much, what does your palm tree do? Okay, they're curved. They kind of they're right next to each other. Look at, well, which way would they go for gravity? This one we might be able to see both sides of that one. I'm gonna lift this up and let you see it a little bit closer up like that. Okay, let's keep going. And that's why we put those middle ones in first. We put those spokes in first so we kind of have a base of where we're headed with it. And yes, I know you're making yellow palm tree. They look like they died, but they'll get better looking in a minute. All right. Sometimes up here in the sky, you're not going to see them quite as, they're going to be just a little mushy. But that opaque paint will, if it's not showing up and you're not seeing that, oh, that white outline show up, you probably have your paint too thin, too much water in it. So give yourself a little bit thicker paint. Pulling these down. Let's see, pull this out. There we go. You'll notice it's going off the page. That's totally fine. Let things go off the page. Let's see, that one's going to go over the top of this one. Okay, pull that out. Let's see, let's pull, what does this one go to? Okay, kind of keep your wits about you, figure out which, so it actually makes sense. All right, now I've got these strange looking orange palm trees. All right, let that dry for just a minute. I'm also going to come into my island here, and I'm going to put some grass in. Now, with this one, make sure you're leaving a little bit of the white. And I'm using that dry brush technique. I'm just coming in and throwing some grass. Looks like kind of like beachy grass up in here. But I'm leaving white of the paper. That's the thing about watercolor is since we don't usually use an opaque paint like white on our, I mean, once in a while we do, but not very often. So the white of the paper, it becomes all of your highlights. And so you want to have a few highlights sparkling around in here. Okay. Now you're going to mix up a nice dark, now let's do a middle green first. Sap green works really well for this. So grab some sap green. While you're mixing, this is drying. You might have to stop the video for a few minutes if you have to. I'm going to throw just a little bit of the lemon yellow in that, just to get it a really nice happy green. And then we're going to go right over the top. Let me see if it's dry here. That's kind of dry. And we're going to put in the green. So then we've got some palm fronds in there green. And if it mixes a little bit with that yellow, it's fine. It's totally fine. You're just greening those up, okay? Just greening up this kind of one side of them. Don't do every little frond because you want some of them to look yellow and it'll look like sunshine on them, okay? And we're going to come in and put shadows in a few minutes. Okay, so we put in the little green and they'll stop looking like they're completely dead. All right, throw in some green. Okay. You seeing what we're doing there? Okay. Okay, now we're going to make a really good dark color, and we're going to mix up some burnt umber and some of your ultramarine, and we're going to make the black recipe. Okay, and I'm going to go a little bit on the brown side of it. So put a little more brown in it than blue in it. And we're going to start working on our trunk. Now, if the sun's coming from here, I'm guessing that there would be kind of a shadowy side here. So I'm going to come in and put in kind of a rough little, you can go the other direction if you want. I'm trying to figure which way the texture on a palm tree would go. Somebody who lives with them would probably know better. Okay, so I'm going to come in and say, all right, right down the shady side. Okay, so we're running down this little shady side here. And you can make these have some texture to them. In fact, definitely put some texture on them. They're going, because I don't think they're smooth. So we'll put some texture on them. All right. Now let's mix up some green. Now, you did that whole swatch, those swatches, and go back and look at that mixing swatch page that you did. How did you get a really nice green? You didn't just grab Viridian. Viridian's really bright and really dark, and you want to have something that's quite dark for this, but not that bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a little bit of sap green in there, and I'm going to throw just a little bit of alizarin crimson in. Well, more than that, just a minute. All right. I'm going to throw some alizarin crimson in there too, because what that's going to do is that's a complementary color to it, and it's going to gray it down and make it a nice dark green. It looks a little darker here on the palette, but it's a nice dark green. And then I'm going to come in and say, all right, which parts of my palm tree would be shady? All right, that's going to be shady there. This might have a shady side here. This would probably have some pretty good shade in it, okay? Underneath. Make sure that they're leaving space between so you can kind of see the ocean behind it. And they look nice and fringy. Let these up in here overlap. Say, well, this is the top one. So pull it over the top and let the other one go underneath. Be a little careful not to be too regular with it. We don't want them to look like the teeth of a comb. Okay, our hand wants to go dun, 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 and have it be totally regular, but you kind of have to tell yourself to say, oh, I want carefully chosen random here. So I'm mixing up a little bit more green, throwing a little sap in that Viridian, and then throwing a little bit of alizarin crimson in there. Okay. So you're getting kind of a nice dark shadowy green. Okay. Let's see, we'll pull this one across here and let the other one go over the top of it. Okay, and then these come down. And don't panic, we're just working on our skills for this, okay? Just the idea of a palm tree. I'm not trying to be photorealistic or anything here. We're just giving it the idea of that frondy little palm tree here. And now it's starting to look like it's green. And it's not totally dead because that yellow becomes kind of the highlight. Right in here in the centers, I like to make them a little bit darker because I figure you'd have shadows. Maybe you even have, I don't know, are these coconut ones? Maybe you have a really dark area right through here where there's lots of shadow. Maybe they have some kind of a fruit or something here. So probably do some research on what palm trees really do. But that gives you that kind of darkness, okay? All right, now, those palm trees are pretty much done, okay? We're going to leave those alone for a bit now. Let's throw in some darks in our grass. And I'm going to start with kind of a bright that's not really a dark. Grabbing some sap green, throwing a little bit of yellow in it. Okay, and just like we put these yellows in, let's throw some greens in there. And that's going to be the grass green. And you can decide how much you want to deal with this, but just kind of dry brush bounce your colors in there. Make sure you're leaving some white still so that it looks like there's sunny little highlights on things. Okay, all right. Then you're going to come in and throw in some darks because where there is sun, there is also shadow. So we're going to throw in some of those little dark greens. And yes, it's still wet, and that's okay, but you're using dry brush. When you're doing this, you can also throw in a cast shadow. Because right down here, you know there would be a cast. Whoops, that's pretty brown. Just a minute. Let's try that again. All right. So you know there would be a cast shadow right down in here among these. Making the cast shadow look like grass because it's on the grass. Also throwing in a few little darks because that makes the darks make the little white bits stand up and show up. So you're not covering every bit. I'm just coming in and saying, all right, where's a blade of grass I can throw a shadow on? But I want to save my whites because I want those beautiful little whites to show. Making sure I've got a little edge here. I've got some little stuff in the foreground that has a little bit more. Sometimes it's fun to add a brighter color to these and pretend that you've got some flowers. I don't know if they grow flowers in the grasses, but sometimes it's fun to throw in just some little red dots. So it looks like we have some kind of little flowers in our plant material here. So it's looking kind of along those lines. Okay, notice we've got a shadow going on here. It's kind of it's a warmish brown. Okay, but it's got enough blue in it. I'm going to throw a little bit more shadow right along the bottom of these trunks. They look a little bright, like there would be sunshine right there, and I'm not sure that would be. Also, I'm going to darken up some of the tops here where there might be shadows from the actual palm fronds. So I'm going to throw a little bit of shadow in there. Okay, we're just about done. All right, now we've got these nice little mountains here. And think about it, atmospheric perspective tells us that they are not, even though they're probably bright green because they're, you know, somewhere beautiful like Hawaii, it's going to be atmospheric perspective makes it a little bit more blue, a little bit more purple. So I'm going to come in with a kind of a reddish purple, bluish color to do my islands. Now, this one I think is closer. So we're going to make that one just a teeny bit darker. Okay, remember that the bottom of it is going to be totally flat, totally horizontal, because water is totally horizontal. And then this one behind it is going to be just a teeny bit lighter because it's a little further away. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Okay, that's looking fairly respectable. So now let's do a couple of fun little things to this, just little detail-y things. Grabbing a paper towel, clean one's best, and just some water. And let's put a couple little clouds in this. And this is called lifting, or we can do some little lines for waves. Let's see how this paper lifts. All I'm doing is taking a little bit of water and I'm drawing a line with it. And we call this scrubbing, but it's not, I mean, not scrubbing in the traditional sense. It's just getting it wet, and then I'm blotting it with that paper towel and lifting. All right, scrubbing would be way too heavy-handed for this, so you just take your brush and you're just very, very gently putting a little line of water in there, and it's just going to loosen up the pigment. And then you're blotting, you're not rubbing, because that's going to smear it all over the place. Okay, and that gives you those little highlights. Cool, huh? Okay, and then let's give us a little cloud up here, because it would be fun to try to put a cloud in here. Now, think about it. Clouds that are close to you are usually closer to the top. Clouds that are further away are going to be like closer to the horizon line up in here. So we're going to put in a little cloud now. Just a little cumulus cloud here. Be a little bit careful that it doesn't end up looking like something Disney, unless you want it to look like something Disney. All right, we're just going to make some little cloud, and then I'm going to come in and lift. I'm just doing little blotting motions with my paper towel, and it's just lifting out the color. Now, if you have a little spot that you don't like the way it looks, you can blot out a little bit more. Now, depending on how your watercolor paper is, fancier watercolor paper like Fabriano watercolor paper or Arches watercolor paper is going to lift really, really well. Some of these student grade watercolor papers, depending on the kind of pigments you're using, will lift a little bit differently, or maybe not quite as much. So it really depends on what paper you're using, how well this is going to work. But now you've got some cute little clouds. Does it need another one? That's two. Maybe let's try one. Mostly because I really don't like that little bleeding that we've got over here. The other nice thing about this is it's a way to cover up some things that you don't love that. All right, so I'm just going to soften that up and blot that. And it's going to look like some little cloud formation. That's the goal anyway. All right, let's put another little cloud. Yes, we are putting in happy clouds. All right, so I'm going to pull that in. Just a nice little cloud there. Okay. Now you can come, now this is where you can either ruin your painting or you can make it better. There's a fine line. I've got a couple little things that I'm not loving, like this is a kind of a hard edge right here. See how it's kind of a strong line? It kind of dried on me a little bit. So I'm just going to soften that up just a bit, just by lifting. But I'm being really careful because I can ruin my painting by coming in too much. Okay. Another thing you could do if you wanted to, if it's all the way dry, don't do this if it's still damp, is check to see if it's dry. And come in and you can lift little bits of sunshine off on the trunk of your tree if you wanted to. You could even do a couple of palm fronds, kind of lighten those up if you wanted to. But I don't think I want to go that far with that. I like what I've got going here. All right, so we're about there on that. Now, when it's all the way dry, or most of it's all, most of it's pretty dry, then you can come back in and you peel off your tape. Now, one thing, when peeling off your tape, if you pull it straight up, you've got a really good chance of ripping your paper. If you pull it right against the paper, kind of horizontally, for some reason it doesn't rip the paper as bad. So try that, see if it helps. Also, it helps if your painting is all the way dry before you try to pull off the tape. If you're pulling tape off of a wet painting, you've got a pretty good chance of ripping the paper with it, and you don't like that much. Okay. So you got a finished little painting of a beach, and you learned some more watercolor techniques. That's great.